Hi folks, Steve Kaposi here at the Adventuring and Camping School in northeast Thailand, just out of my base camp. I want to make a few more comments about this new bushcraft knife that I'm promoting. Just further comments to my previous video. I just want to reinforce the main points and the main features of this knife. I've now had this for a few days, I've had a closer look at it, and I've picked up on a few issues which, for want of a better term, might be negative things, which I'll also talk about. I don't lie or deceive anyone. Everything I say and promote is in good faith. So I don't want someone to pick up this knife and say, oh, I don't like that thing, you didn't tell me about that. So I'm going to talk about potential negative things which are not deal breakers. It's still a fine knife, nothing wrong with it, but just a couple of things I picked up on. So the first thing I want to talk about are the main features of this knife. For me, there are 10 main features of a good main working knife, MWK. The main working knife, that's my term, is your main knife you keep on your hip at all times. It's your main working knife. In the previous video I said there were 9 features, I've just added one, which I'll get to in a moment. The first 5 of those features are things that your knife must have. Simple as that, you must have these features. Number 1, a minimum 6-inch blade. I believe a 6-inch blade is sufficient for your main working knife, especially when teamed up with some sort of a good machete and a small axe or hatchet. If you plan to do any cutting, chopping, batoning of wood out there, you take a small axe or hatchet. But obviously your knife needs to be capable of batoning and chopping, and this is. So this has got an 8-inch blade, which I think is actually becoming a bit too large as a main working knife. There is a 7-inch version which I plan to get and show you when I get it. But this is the 8-inch version, badass knife, nothing wrong with it. But I still think a 6-inch blade is adequate. Number 2, the thickness, it's minimum 5/32 inches thick, which is 0.15 of an inch, or about 4 millimeters. That's plenty thick for a knife. It ain't bending, it ain't breaking, it ain't going anywhere. Number 3, it's obviously full tank construction, one piece of metal all the way through. It's not going to break, you can baton. The entire length of the knife is flat on the top. Good for batoning. You don't want any interference on the top. It's got to be flat all the way through, no handles sticking up and so forth. Number 5, you want a sharp 90-degree section to shed sparks from a ferrocerium rod. And there's the sparks. You should have other ways to strike sparks from ferrocerium rods in your kit. You should have 3, 4, 5, 6 ways to shed sparks. The knife is really an emergency way. The sharp 90-degree section is at the bottom. The top could be sharper, so that's one thing I would redesign. But there is, as you just saw, you can shed sparks. It's a done deal. The next 3 features are things that your knife should have. Not necessarily must have, just should have. The bulge at the front, it's a nice parang cookie style bulge. It gets weight forward, which is good for chopping. That's what you want. I don't advocate chopping or batoning for that matter wood with a knife. You have a machete as well and a small axe, but in a pinch, in emergencies, if you have to, that's a badass knife, you can chop with it. The bulge gets weight forward, that's good for chopping action. It's also good for other tasks as well. I just believe in having a bulge at the front. The 7 is a sharp point, sharper than a standard sort of drop point or spear point. I believe in sharp points. I've got videos where I make char cloth in a bamboo container and I drill a hole using a clip point. Not this style clip point, another knife, but it's just a sharp point. There are negatives to that, which I'll get to at the end. And number 8 is a grommet hole for cordage. You attach the knife to your belt, you'll never lose it. And the last 2 features are things that your knife can have. Not must have, not even should have, just can have. A heavy duty saw section on the spine. I believe in heavy duty saws. It just gives you another cutting option. This knife also has a bottle opening feature here, which you don't need, but it's there. And number 10 was that secondary blade on top. That's the thing or the feature I added after the last video, after seeing this knife. It keeps a nice sharp knife which won't get blunted or damaged from work on the main blade. So there's a secondary blade on top. So they're the 10 main features to a good working knife that I think a knife should have.